You might have seen my presentations in the History Channel programs and so forth. Today, in early May of 2024, I have something new and very interesting to tell you. Once again, the Varsegovs, Russian journalists from Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper, who have been investigating this 1959 case also, they found fascinating testimony. Please see my playlist of previous Dyatlov Pass videos. I put the URL in the description to this video. The Komsomolskaya Pravda newspapers staged encounter. You could call it maybe an eyewitness get-together. I don't think confrontation is the right word for it. For the two participants in the search of the tourists who disappeared in the mountains of the Urals in 1959, they found out unexpected details of this tragedy. And they want to add a few words, the Varsegovs do, that this tragedy has been haunting researchers for more than half a century. In the winter of 1959, 9 tourists, and I'll explain to you the meaning of the Russian term tourist here, or we could say sports tourists, disappeared in the northern Urals. In 16 days, the participants of the hike or the expedition had to ski at least 300 kilometers in the north of the Sverdlovsk region and climb 2 peaks of the northern Urals. The campaign or the expedition belonged to the 3rd highest difficulty categories. Participants of the campaign were Yuri Krivonishenko, Yuri Doroshenko, Rustem Slobodin, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kalivatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Semyon Zolotaryov, and Igor Dyatlov. He was the group leader. He was the 5th-year student of the Ural Polytechnic Institute. A month later, rescuers found an empty tent, and there were 5 frozen bodies within a radius of 1.5 kilometers from it. The corpses of the others were found only in May. Almost all the hikers were barefoot and half naked. Some had fatal injuries. According to investigators, the hikers died on the 9th of February 1st to February 2nd. Hundreds of people participated in the search for the Dyatlov group, tried to solve the mystery of their deaths. But it's still unclear why the young people ran away from the tent into the bitter cold and to their doom. I will add more about the events that happened, but at the end of the video. Let's stick to what the Varsegovs found out. Of those who participated in the search for the group, only a few remain alive today. For the first time, the Varsegovs tried to conduct this encounter, eyewitness encounter, between Sergei Sogrin, 87 years old, and Vladislav Karelin, 92 years old, in order to get, let's say, the most complete picture of what was happening. So both Sergei Nikolaevich Sogrin, and I will refer to him as SN, abbreviated, just like the Varsegovs did, and Vladislav Georgievich Karelin, VG is how I will refer to him. They were students of the Ural Polytechnic University in 1959. Both are experienced tourists who were about to receive the title of Master of Sports. That's the Soviet designation. Both in January of the same year led their groups, expeditionary groups, in the circumpolar and northern Urals. Both Sergei Nikolaevich, SN, and Vladislav Georgievich, VG, were using the Russian way to address people, their personal name and paternal name. They were students of the Ural Polytechnic University in 1959. So let's go with the first question. How did you find out about the tragedy? SN. And January 23, three groups of Polytech tourists went hiking. Two, under the leadership of Dyatlov and Blinov, to the northern Urals. My group was going to the circumpolar Urals. Dyatlov's route was shorter, but when we returned, our mutual friend Rudik Sidov suddenly came running to me and said, "There is panic at the institute. Igor's group is not there. The search begins. They don't know what to do or where to start. You're being asked to come." VG. I found out about the missing tourist on February 25 in the city of Serov, Sverdlovsk region. Our route passed a little south of where the Dyatlov group went. On the way back, we had a transfer in Serov. A stranger came up to us in the dining room and asked if they were looking for you. We knew that it was definitely not us. There were still 2 days left before our deadline. We received a call from the post office to the Sverdlovsk Committee of Physical Culture and Sports, where we were told that the search for Igor Dyatlov's group was underway. And they told us to go to Ivdel. On February 26, we were on the spot, Ivdel. This is the remote town from where the Dyatlov group moved to the route. There was a search headquarters there at Varsegovs, and I can only add that there were also what you could call concentration camps around the area. Question: what were your first thoughts? SN: we didn't think that something tragic had happened. Maybe one of the guys broke his leg or got sick. Pulling the victim out of the taiga through deep snow is hell of a job, so we assumed that Dyatlov group participants were holed up in the taiga, boreal forest, and waiting for help. VG: I didn't even have any disturbing thoughts. We decided to come to Ivdel and find out about everything there. Question: you both took part in the search. SN: the tactics of the search efforts were as follows. The Dyatlov route is a circular route of 300 kilometers. We had no idea where to look for the group. Therefore, knowing that Igor must visit specific sites and that traces of tourists may remain there, it was planned to drop 3-4 groups by helicopter to different points, in particular to the peaks, where the sport tourist groups usually leave notes about their stay. Such notes were packed in cans and laid with stones, according to the Varsegovs. I, at the time almost as master of sports Moisei Axelrod and a climber of the second sports category, Stas Tipikin, were dropped off near Mount Oterteny. VG: when we arrived in Ivdel in the evening, we met with the head of the search, Yevgeny Maslenikov. He showed a plan where and which groups would be abandoned. The next morning, he and I flew around the whole area by an airplane. I know that even when flying low by an airplane, nothing is visible on the ground. No small details, especially a snow-covered tent or dead people. Therefore, that flyby yielded nothing. SN: the next day, we climbed to the top, and the only thing we found was a note from a group of Muscovites on a summer hike. It became clear that Dyatlov's group was not on Oterteny. When we were descending, a helicopter flew by and dropped a pennant with the text, "A tent was found on the slope of Mount 1079. Get ready to evacuate." VG: suddenly on February 26 in the evening, a radiogram arrives. The tent has been found. The next morning, our team took off by the first helicopter to the area of Mount Holat Sahel. While we were flying, my thoughts were sad. The empty tent did not bode well. And when they arrived and unloaded, I was literally crushed. I still remember how the searchers, Sharavin and Koptelov, came to us, and without even saying hello, they stunned us. Do you see the top of the cedar sticking out? There are two people lying under this cedar. An incredible fear seized me. SN. We arrived at the pass on March 1st. There were 2 bags of corpses under the remains. I had no feeling of fear. There was bitterness. Question. What versions, hypotheses, were discussed? SN. There were different assumptions, but everyone unanimously dismissed the avalanche. There were mountain climbers among us, and no one saw any sign or condition for the formation of the avalanche: weather, appropriate wind, underlying layer of snow. Moreover, I made a vertical cut of the snow at the side of the tent, and I realized that there could be no avalanche or snowfall there. I'm explaining why. As a result of wind blowing, the top layer of snow becomes quite dense. Due to the temperature difference between the top layer of snow and the soil, the ablation process occurs. That is the transition of snow from a solid state to a gaseous one, becoming a gas. This vapors turned into ice crystals. The volume of snow decreases, and the upper dense layer seems to hang in the air. If an animal runs along this slope or a person passes, the snow mass subsides and begins to roll down the slope like on ball bearings. None of this happened. Besides, there were about 20 of us gathered at the tent at that time, and if we were standing on a snowboard, we would have left with it. But we were standing on solid rock. Question. What was wrong with the tent? VG. The description of the tent in the criminal case should be treated very carefully. The fact is that its condition was violated several times even before the arrival of the investigators. Slaptsov and Sharavin, who found the tent, immediately climbed inside, cutting through the snow with an ice axe. A day later, 2 more people from our team visited it, even took out their skis. And I would never put up a tent in this place. A very unsuitable place to stay overnight. SN, I disagree. Many researchers scold Dyatlov for not coming down to spend the night. But what was the point? Climb up the pass, go down into the forest again, and then climb up again? He would do nothing but walk up and down. According to the Goltsi, bare stones, clarified Varsegovs. According to the snow, even without skis, he would have managed to reach the top in the daylight and return back. Question. How were the bodies of sports tourists found? VG. Doroshenko and Krivonishenko were found by searchers, students. The Mansi found Dyatlov dusted with snow. Mansi are representatives of local ethnic people, clarified Varsegovs, and I will add, you should watch my videos about the Mansi hypothesis. Okay, let's get back. Later that day, it was reported that Zina Kolmogorova was found under a layer of 30 to 40 centimeters of snow. The dog detected her. SN. I will not forget the feeling of this discovery. Zina was the favorite of the tourist section. All the boys were in love with her, including me. 2 or 3 weeks before our hike, Zina was going to come with us. She really wanted to visit the circumpolar Urals, but later she moved on to the Dyatlov group, since his route was shorter in time and it was more convenient for her. There on the pass, I was constantly thinking, why didn't you come with us? You would have stayed alive. This bitterness of loss accompanies me all my life, said SN. VG. After Zina was found, the search became more thorough. They lined up in a line and walked, piercing the snow with metal probes sticks all the way, step by step. On March 5, I found Rustem Slobodin in this way. I poked into the snow, and the metal measuring stick was resting on something. Again, it doesn't go away. They began to tear with their hands. That's how they found him. He was immediately identified by our tourist, Stas Tipikin. That's when it became clear. If 5 of them were lying here, then the rest were lying somewhere nearby. Question: was there anything strange during the search? VG: the fact that the tourists jumped out of the tent for some incredible reason. However, we understood that they could not have gone far. SN: there was a unanimous opinion. Something supernatural forced the group to leave the tent, cutting its ramp. Investigator Ivanov even then said that the trouble came from the air, but it is not clear what kind of trouble this is. VG: by that time, we had witnessed a very strange phenomenon ourselves. When we were hiking on February 17th in the morning, I heard a shout, "Guys, look!" I jumped out into to the outside in whatever I was sleeping in, and saw a big bright spot in the sky. It was growing. A small star appeared in the center of it, which also began to increase. This spot moved from southwest to northeast and seemed to fall to the ground. Then it disappeared behind the forest, leaving a bright streak in the sky. It was impressive. It seemed that the Earth would explode from a collision with some planet. When we talked about this case during the search, Evgeny Maslenikov became interested and sent a radiogram to the headquarters. Were any new meteor rockets launched at the approximate date of the demise of Dyatlov's group on February the 2nd? SN: I've seen something similar too. The big star rose higher and higher above the forest. It was very bright. Then it began to turn yellow, increasing in size. And then it turned into a ball, a sphere, the size of a lunar disk. This sphere started moving right towards us. It felt like it was floating right over the forest, and it scared us a lot. It was only years later that I realized that we had observed a rocket launch from the Baikonur. VG: I object. Either space or ballistic missiles were launched from Baikonur, the engine of which worked for 6 minutes, and you observed your phenomenon for 20 minutes. In addition, your radiogram records that the object was flying horizontally, low over the forest. This means that it was not Baikonur, but some other spaceport closer to the pass, to the Dyatlov Pass. Question: what did you know about Zolotaryov? But first, a few words from the Varsegovs. The 37-year-old Semyon Zolotaryov was the most controversial participant of this expedition. Firstly, he joined the group almost a couple of days before the trip. Secondly, he introduced himself as Sasha, although according to his passport, he was Semyon. Thirdly, he came to the Urals from the Caucasus and did not know the Ural Mountains. Fourthly, taking a stranger on a difficult route was against sports and tourism rules, but for some reason they took him anyway. Let me also add something from myself. I have a video, at least one, about Zolotaryov. Very interesting background. I went to in great details, as did, by the way, Varsegovs and a few others. It was a very interesting personality, and there's a whole unusual biography there. But see the video. Now back to the former searchers. SN: I will start from afar about getting to know Semyon. The Great Patriotic War, World War II, showed that our fighters were not ready to fight in extreme mountain conditions. During the German occupation of the Caucasus, many of our soldiers died in avalanches, ice cracks, and fell off cliffs. Therefore, after the war, tourist bases and climbing camps were established throughout the country so that those who wished could come there and undergo initial training. And instructors were needed to work at these campsites. The practice, it was like this. The instructor signs a contract with a campsite or an alpine camp for a season or two, then leaves to work at another base. For example, from the Caucasus to Altai, Semyon Zolotaryov worked so hard in many places. And in 1958, he moved to the Urals, to the Kurov campsite. To improve his skills, he needed category level trips, so he could get a Master of Sports designation and later even run a campsite. It was not difficult to find out that such routes are being prepared in the tourist section of the Ural Polytechnic Institute. And once he was advised to contact me, I was preparing to go to the circumpolar Urals. He made a good impression, sociable, athletic, and then we all realized that he would not be a burden on our campaign. Later, he joined Dyatlov's group, since the duration of that group's campaign or expedition was shorter. VG. In 1957, my group and I went to the western Sayans Mountains. The crossing of the lake Teletskoye was coming, and there at the local campsite, it was Zolotaryov who told us that a boat runs here and you can cross to the other shore on it. It is curious that I remember this case recently when I was discussing Semyon's personality with someone in a conversation. Just one comment. Alpine, that means mountain climbing, mountain climbers, alpinists in Russian. Anyway, next. Let's go to question. Will it ever be known what happened? SN. Another lengthy investigations. No. After lengthy investigations, it became clear to me that it was useless to bang my head against the wall. We will never know anything. I adhere to the technogenic or technological hypothesis. We're talking about unsuccessful missile tests, clarified Varsegovs. If only because the corpses we found were lying in a dynamic pose. So the cause of death is not freezing. In addition, the investigator Lev Ivanov himself admitted decades later that he could not tell the truth and apologized to the relatives of the victims. VG. It is difficult to answer this question. On the one hand, many years have passed, and who is still out there? On the other hand, I really hope that the truth will be known. And to do this, you need to make the most active efforts and not leave this topic, this subject. The Varsegovs wanted to add this, and I'll read you what they said. It happens that we, the authors, even remember the events of a month ago, which we both witnessed in different ways. Someone remembered perfectly well what the other did not pay attention to. Therefore, the memories of searchers, shared memories, are especially valuable. In this case, we were surprised by the fact that we had not previously paid attention to. This is the flight of the glowing spheres. It seemed that there was nothing to be surprised at. Ordinary ballistic missiles were flying from the Kazakh rocket launch sites. But we are reading the arguments of Vladimir Karelin, a specialist, by the way, expert in rocket technology. Here he says ballistic missiles whose engines worked for 6 minutes, and you observed your phenomenon for 20 minutes. In addition, your radiogram records records that the object was flying horizontally low over the forest. So it was not Baikonur, but another spaceport closer to the pass. And that's right. it turns out that the launches were not from Kazakhstan, but from a much closer distance. But from where? And the missiles were not ballistic. But what kind? Similar to the current winged ones? Therefore, the solution to the mystery of fireballs previously explained to us by the launch of ballistic missiles is now somehow becoming questionable, and it requires further study. Now, let me add a few more words. In the winter of 1959, 9 hikers, skiers, also referred to as tourists, who went on a hike under the leadership of Igor Dyatlov, disappeared in the mountains of the northern Urals in the USSR. A month later, rescuers found their tent cut open, and within a radius of 1.5 kilometers from it, they found 5 frozen bodies. The bodies of the others were found only in May. Almost all the hikers were barefoot and half-dressed. Some had fatal injuries. It is still not solved why the young people ran away in the bitter cold and to their doom. My research began back in early 1990s. And I have an even earlier book published in the USSR where it was alluded to, but they were afraid to describe this case. But it was from the Urals, that book, I think from 1970s. But anyway, I have Soviet references from earlier times, again, when the case was not discussed and was basically a forbidden subject. But even the totalitarian state is not able to silence people, as they try to do it to us, to cancel people, to silence them. And those who are emulating the Soviet way of silencing their opponents should remember it. Now, as to the term tourists, let me explain the meaning of tourism in this context. It was referred to in the USSR to group hikes, nature exploration, sports-related active recreation, including skiing, water sports, and so forth. Not simple sightseeing and shopping in various locations. That's the Western equivalent. Those interested in my continuous research of this case need only to look in that playlist about Dyatlov Pass. I follow up on most interesting Russian research developments. The tragedy that occurred more than 60 years ago at the Dyatlov Pass continues to be a subject of interest and fascination, albeit in a macabre way, for the Russians, and not only them. But soon I'll have more videos, more information that is not out there, really, or if it is, very few people know about it, about this tragedy in the Urals. Now, as for those who ask me about the book on the subject, my book on the subject, I can write one very quickly if there's a publisher out there. I don't have enough free time to run around and look for publishers. It would be nice, but it's just there's so much to do. I can use the money to dedicate myself completely to the research of the cases that interest me and that I present in my channel. If there is a publisher and wants to get in touch with me, I would love to travel to Mongolia, for example, for field research, a few other places, follow the Ivan Yefremov sites, as I did in my younger years. There's a whole world out there and so many discoveries to make and describe some that few people know about. But look, if not, I'll continue making videos about paranormal phenomena of Eurasia and beyond and share some of my experiences. So I want to thank you for your attention to my work. I'll continue to bring you more interesting videos. Please like my videos. Please tell others. And I'll tell you about more developments as the time goes by.